Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. I'm Krista.
I'm Kristen.
And we are the Sixth Sense Society. Welcome to another episode of the Sixth Sense Society. Tonight we are thrilled to have astrologer, tarot card reader, and prolific author Brad Kronen tonight. So welcome, Brad.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And before we start with our guest, we're going to talk a little about the cosmic weather and a little bit more since we have a professional astrologer here tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Tonight the moon is a waxing crescent in Taurus. That should make you happy, Kristen.
Mm-hmm. And some nice luck, hopefully.
Yes. Also, earlier today, Mercury moved into the sign of Pisces. Not much more going on. Tuesday we have a first quarter moon, 23 degrees, 55 minutes in Taurus at 2:26 p.m. And of course, Thursday we have on Valentine's Day, we have Mars going into the sign of Taurus as well. Lots of earth energy.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's really the cosmic weather for the week. And Brad, you had a couple of thoughts about what's going on in the cosmic world in general.
Well, I was going to say for Valentine's Day, for starters, usually Venus is in Aries around Valentine's Day. And that gives it's more of a license for women to go up and be pursuant or aggressive towards their Valentine's dates. So just keep that in mind, usually. But 2019 stands to be an interesting year, given the fact that Jupiter, Neptune, and Saturn will all be in their natural signs that they rule over. And so this should be interesting to see what unfolds
That
this year.
sounds really great. Yes, and so do you have anything you wanted to add to the cosmic weather report, Kristen?
Well, something that I had been meditating on that I really wanted to talk about was that we're in a bit of a bridge time period, especially February is very much of a bridge month, especially the 6 weeks between now and the spring equinox. Now, what saw his shadow? The animal groundhog, and and I was preparing this, and I said it in my mind before, and then I completely blanked out. The groundhog did see his shadow. So 2019 is going to be an early spring. Now here in California, we're actually experiencing a lot of weather, so I think we're all going to be happy about that. But what I want to mention is that this very much is a time to sit in the eye of the storm, or the eye of the eye of the tornado is actually a very still place. So even though there's a lot going on around you astrologically and a lot of energies, this time I think is very much a good time to kind of like be still, be in your meditation, try to flow very easily through everything, because we've been through a lot astrologically with the eclipses, everything going on in late 2018. I know I always talk a lot about late 2018, but I just feel there was a lot going on and a lot that kind of just slid right into January that we kind of carried. And then boom, once we got into January, 2 eclipses. So being that February is very much a bridge between the winter and the spring, this is a good time to kind of settle in, sit in the eye of the storm, and begin to look forward to the seeds that you've planted growing in the spring, because they will. They really, really will, even though the times have been so intense right now.
That sounds great. So thank you. Michael, did you want to talk about some of the upcoming shows before we get going?
Yeah, we've got some really great shows coming up over the next little while, so I'm actually pretty excited. Next week we have our friend Jim McGrath back, and he's going to do a show on the history and symbolism of the Holy Trinity, and I think that's going to be absolutely fascinating. We have Krista's dad at the end of the month doing a show on past lives and the work of Edgar Cayce in particular. He's an expert on Edgar Cayce for decades and has worked for decades in past life regression and so forth. So we're going to do some past life stuff. We're going to do a show at the beginning of the month of March on magical wars, witch wars and magical wars, and some fascinating stuff. I'm sure Brad is familiar with some of that stuff, that especially the Second World War. There's some very interesting things that went on there, so we'll talk about that. I'm still sort of setting up our schedule for March. We have some really cool stuff coming up. We have a guy who's a hypnotist that's doing a lot of experiments with hypnosis, especially on a broad sort of a large level, hypnotizing the general public at once sort of thing that he wants to try and do experiments with. And he's been talking about one of the interesting things would take a Christian and a Muslim and hypnotize them so they think they're the other religion and see how that plays out. So he's just a fascinating character, so we should have a lot of fun with that. And I've made connection with a guy who is a ghost hunter from long before ghost hunting was even a thing. He's traveled all over the world to Scotland and Ireland and England and Europe and everywhere all across America hunting ghosts. So he's going to be a guest on our show. And if people don't know, the location that we have, our Sanctum Sanctorum, where we broadcast from, is haunted. And Krista's actually seen the ghost here, so as have many people. So I lured him in by saying, come to our show, and then you guys can do a ghost hunt after. So he's going to bring some of his friends, and we're going to stick around and ghost hunt the lodge after the show. So I'm still sort of setting up dates with some of that stuff, so I'll give you guys more information, and you'll find it on the website whenever we have the event. So hopefully that'll be fun. Other than that, real happy with the way the show is going. Our podcast is growing, our audience is growing, and we're super excited and super thankful to all you guys for believing in us and supporting us and listening to us. And we hope we can just continue to do fun shows that you guys are going to love. And we're having an awfully good time doing it. So as long as we're all having fun, this is going to be a great thing. So with that, I'm going to turn you guys back over to Brad. And I'm sure we're all going to have things to say about relationships and love with Valentine's Day coming up. And as psychics and readers and astrologers, let's just say we've dealt with a lot of questions about relationships in the last 2 decades. So I'm sure we all have some insight. So have a great show, guys, and I'm sure I'll chip in from time to time. So take it away.
Thank you, Michael. And I wanted to give a brief bio of Brad. He has an impressive background. He's been a professional astrologer, tarot reader for 25 years, but he's a classically trained opera singer with a bachelor's degree in psychology and English literature from Fairfield University in Connecticut. A prolific author. You can see all of these books he's published. I think it's over 22 or something like that. And also lots of articles. And I just want to mention kind of quickly here that his writing is quite unusual for an astrologer because it's part wit and part history and astrology. So it's very readable. Like, you don't have to know anything about astrology and you can pick up a book and enjoy it, which isn't always true about anything esoteric.
I agree.
I know, I've read some of those books. He's had numerous TV appearances. Some include, he was the first astrologer on The Real Housewives of the OC and also a Canadian show, Reality Obsessed. Yep. And 2 of the book titles I really liked. He's great with book titles. So I like the one, we have it here, I think, 7 Tales of Hubris and Other Divine Things, and The Epic Tale of Cupid and Psyche, which would be very appropriate for tonight. So just a brief bio of Brad. You can see he's very versatile and brings to the table things that not all readers do bring to the table, like the psychology and also the musical background. So I think it's very impressive.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I wanted to have you maybe talk a little bit first about how you just came to be an astrologer and tarot card reader. I think you became interested in astrology first. Is that correct?
Yeah, astrology came first. And basically how I got interested was realizing the hard parts of the challenging periods of my life matched up with challenging aspects astrologically, where they didn't give me answers, but they basically said, oh, that's kind of supposed to happen around that time period. And then I just took the ball and ran with it.
Mm-hmm. And didn't you say to me once that wasn't one of your music teachers into astrology?
Yeah,
or?
My first voice coach was a really, really well-trained astrologer, and she would incorporate that in my voice lessons. It was very interesting, but yeah, she was very, very good.
That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
And then tarot, how did you initially become interested in doing tarot?
Tarot came about basically when I realized there are 4 elements in astrology. There are 4 suits in tarot, and I came across a couple of choice authors who combined the 2. And I said, oh, wow, that really does work esoterically as a whole concept.
So, Kristen, do you want to ask him anything, or I can keep going?
I actually wanted to know, since you've done a lot of research on all the different signs, and what's really cool about all of Brad's books is that no matter who you're dating, as long as you know their sign, you can kind of look up any combination. So if you're a Capricorn, you have an extensive on every other, zodiac sign. What were some of your favorite couples that you came across in researching all of your books?
So I did a 12-part series called Love in the Stars, where each book is a dating manual for each sign, dating every other sign. Yes. And so the first couple I came across that I found was interesting was Napoleon and Josephine. And he was a Leo, hence Napoleon complex Leo. But she was a Cancer. And the funny thing is, they're known as the greatest love of all time. They're known as, they're always brought to this ideal place. And he was enamored of her, and he wrote her these copious amounts of love letters.
Yes, he's famous for his love letters to Josephine. They're beautiful.
And historians can't understand why there aren't that many of her back to him, because she really didn't feel the same way.
Oh,
and
right.
She was in the French Revolution and was about to be guillotined. She had lost her husband, who got guillotined before her, but she had teenage children. She was older. Napoleon meets her and is totally enthralled, and she thought, I'm a Cancer, I need a home for my kids. All right, I'll go with you. And she put up with him.
Right.
And I found that was it added a whole nother dimension to historical couples that really get assumed all black and white.
Right.
So,
right.
and, I lost my thing here. Whoop, sorry.
So in a sense, couples that kind of appear to be one way on the outside, but when you go inside their home or their bedroom, it's a completely different thing.
Absolutely. Or how they're historically well remembered for.
Because they're known as this great love story.
Yeah. But
and apparently not.
And I must say this, double sign, so if you date your own sign, I kind of don't recommend that. There's one exception to that rule,
right?
Namely Gemini. But double Leos, those are the biggest war battles you've ever seen between couples when they divorce. So Madonna and Sean Penn.
Right.
Bennifer.
Right.
Ben Affleck, Jennifer Lopez. But especially when it's two fixed signs, Leo, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, they tend to really be set in their ways. And so when there's two of them, they really have tough things to compromise with. So
very, very interesting. And what do you think about opposing signs? Do opposites really attract?
Now, here's the fun part is my theory is the signs that get
it depends on your whole natal chart, of course.
Well, but for any given person, you get along best with your own element. So if you are an air, fire, earth sign, water sign, you get along best with the other signs that are part of that element. But polar opposites are technically the best or the most long-lasting. However, I will say this. So polar opposites attract.
Right.
Okay? So if you meet a polar opposite, you're going to have initial chemistry, initial attraction factor, and, physical or otherwise. But once it gets past that attraction factor, if there's nothing to keep the couple, mutual things in common, things like that, they're going to drive each other crazy.
Is there an example in one of your books of one of these sort of tragic, they started off well, but they were opposites attracted and it was great, but then...
I'll say this, Cancer Capricorn tends to have the ones that are the best long-standing ones in the here and now. A good example would be Cancer. So Cancer Scorpio is those are two water signs that works well. That's Princess Di and Prince Charles, right?
Yes, we all know how that turned out.
Astrologers, when they first announced their engagement, were all excited. It's a Cancer Scorpio. It should be really, really, wonderful. We all know what happened. The fairy tale didn't last.
Right.
However, Prince William and Kate Middleton, Capricorn Cancer, polar opposites.
How interesting.
They're a really solid team.
So they're an example. They're two sides of the same coin, actually. The mom and the dad, and then the son with his wife. It's sort of this was how it could be if it works great. And then the shadow side was, of course, Di and how it doesn't work.
William's chart is identical to Princess Diana's.
Really?
I would get them confused because they literally look identical.
Wow.
So, but that's a good example of two water signs. And for example, two fire signs, you're going to have great sexual chemistry. There I said it. But, Rita Moreno just posted she just published a autobiography.
Yes.
And she had an affair, a long-standing affair with Marlon Brando.
Oh, right. Right.
He was an Aries, she was a Sagittarius. That's a
Right.
great combo. The nightmarish relationship that became of those two is unbelievable, you know. But then you have something like an Aries like Celine Dion with her husband who just passed.
Renee.
Renee Angelil.
Yes.
And they have, and that's Aries Capricorn. That's a really, so that's when two couples clash. It's called a square.
Mm-hmm.
And so when two couples square, it's like, oh, that's really not a good combo. Every couple can work.
Right.
Every couple can work. It just is dependent upon, you know, how much. So if it's a challenging angle between the two, if you understand where your partner's coming from with what their likes, dislikes, or their limitations, you can work better with that. And you also can't assume when two couples are the same element, oh, it's going to be smooth sailing. Every couple has problems.
Yeah,
Every
absolutely.
couple, you know, and communication is the key to all of it.
Right.
So, but it's a great example of the Aries and the Sagittarius should be like a match made in heaven was a match made in hell, and Aries and Capricorn, it was like a clashing thing. They were the most long-standing couple in the music industry.
Wow.
Right.
So.
Right. It has to do also about just wanting to work at it as well.
And every relationship involves
it's
work.
Ups and downs.
It involves work. Both parties have to work at it.
Right.
So.
That's true.
Very
Michael
cool.
and I are opposite.
Yeah. Cancer
Married
Capricorn.
over 20 years. So, you know, but it is true. One of my problems is with Aries, no matter what. Like it squares my.
Sure.
And we had a friend for a long time that was a friend of ours, but we always did have some tension as a friend. Even like I remember even sometimes walking on the boardwalk, and we'd have like completely different conversations.
Oh
I
wow.
mean, it was weird. It'd be like. I mean, not just, you know, two people talking about different topics, but it was literally like we had two different languages going. And I always remember thinking, like, it's got to be the Aries Cancer thing, you know? I said, and yet we did have a friendship for quite a long time until it kind of fell apart due to differences more, you know, sort of moral differences.
But I tell people every relationship, and I get all the time, I'm with a, fill in the sign, I'm with a Leo, I'm with a Taurus. Is that good? Is that bad with my sign? Every sign can work. It's just knowing what you're dealing with is what makes it workable.
Right. And if what could be very interesting about doing a synergy sort of report with someone that, you know, you're established with is that to know where your challenging aspects might be.
Absolutely.
So that if there's a challenge, you could be like, okay, it means I have to be open-minded there, or we need to have a task as a couple. I just read something that was where they said where the challenging aspect kind of said, well, have a task as a couple that you're working towards, because that kind of creative flow will actually help dissipate some of this challenging aspects. It's just one example. But, you know, there's something with everybody. There's negatives and positives.
And there always needs to be mutual work on both sides. One person can't be doing all the work all the time.
Right.
You know?
I had a question about when you look at people's charts. So, for instance, like, do you find it easier as an astrologer to look at a person's love potential with just their natal chart, or with the synastry chart with a couple? Or is it just different? Like you could do either very well. Like I could look at your natal chart and tell you what kinds of things you might be going through, what kinds of relationships you would probably be happy with, or which do you think is, what are the differences, I guess?
So there's two ways to do a couple with astrology with looking at both their birth charts together. There's synastry, where you literally line them up against each other, and then there's a composite chart.
Okay.
Where it literally forms a new chart with the two people as one couple. And that's the overall chart for that grouping of the two. Synastry is best used when you first meet someone, when it's in early stages of the relationship, because you compare. So the key to a woman is her Venus, the key to a man is her Mars, but it looks at overall where each planet lies with the other person, so that if they're aligned together or if they're off from each other or opposing each other. A composite is when a couple is established. So not when you first meet someone, and you look at wherever the blue lines, that's harmonious, the red lines are challenging or difficult, shall we say. But that's the overall, this is how this couple works as a team.
Oh, interesting.
You know?
Right.
Yeah, I personally prefer to do composite when a couple's well established. If you just met someone, you don't do a composite because you could still, make it or break it.
Right.
So,
no, I didn't know the difference. That's really cool. And the two, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But I think it's very helpful either way. It's very helpful because it shows your dynamics against the other person's, where you're going to have potential problems. Exactly right. And like knowing that, you're going to at least be mindful of not pushing each other's buttons automatically.
Right, because like if you kind of gosh, I really like this person. We really do have a lot in common. We really do click. We really have the chemistry, but these few couple of things. And if you're just aware of what they are and what you can do, and then actually talk with them about it, maybe if they're not into astrology, use it. But when you're having a conversation, well, I need this, it can just help with aid in communication and with being clear about your needs.
So for example, like on the forward to all my Love in the Stars books, I say, if you have a Gemini and you're going on a first date, have at least 4 questions to ask them about themselves, because believe me, they're going to take offense if you don't ask them anything. They like conversation, but they also like being stimulated mentally. If you have a Scorpio, don't plan a birthday surprise party where all your friends from grammar school and high school, they're not going to appreciate it. So it's things like that where it's like, if you understand the nature of the person you're dealing with astrologically, it helps a great deal.
Sure. One of my kind of beefs with people that are kind of like dabbling in astrology is they think that certain signs are more sexual than another, but I think it's just that people are turned on differently.
Absolutely.
Because it's not, we're human beings. And some humans are more asexual, but they could be any sign.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's what like you said, the Gemini is mental and it wants to have questions. What turns
verbal
on?
foreplay and mental foreplay.
Verbal foreplay, exactly right. Yeah, and the water signs, technically, even though Scorpio is a water sign, Scorpio gets the rep for getting all the short end of the stick, but they find it amusing. But the water signs really need to feel emotional attachment.
Yeah.
For them to have like a long-term sexual relationship, there needs to be emotions, or else they're just not going to do it just for the sake of doing it.
Right. So they're not someone to be like, they're not the sugar daddy types that are going to be like, I don't care if I have chemistry with you. I don't care. Because like
I'll buy you over.
Because some people can do that. Some people, and I don't understand it, me personally, and I'm sure as I'm learning about my chart, okay, that's why. Because I never understood, how can you, like, if you're not attracted to the person, how can you just be okay with getting all these gifts? So not that I don't love gifts, I'm a Taurus, but but like you can't even stand sleeping with them. You can't even kissing them. Yeah. But some people seem to, and it's interesting how if you look at the chart, they probably just don't need that emotional attachment.
And money and things can be quite the aphrodisiac for certain people.
Yes.
That's true.
And I would say that's more earth-oriented.
Yes.
But each core element has their own basic source of like inspiration or sexual attraction.
Right.
So as a professional reader, one of the questions I have for you is, what is one of your most common issues you deal with in regards to love and romance, like, or even a couple of common things, like what patterns? Is it people that are unable to find the right person? Are people that are obsessed with love? That seems to be one of the common themes.
It's funny because amongst women that seek astrology or tarot for relationship issues, they tend to think, oh, I found someone, there can't be anyone possibly else out there, And I'm like, believe me, hold back a little bit, because if you show restraint, it adds a lot more allure to the person. Yeah. But I'm sorry, but I get a lot of married people, people that are interested in married people that they think they're going to leave their spouse.
Oh, that's a good one, though. That is true.
I have yet to have a single person come back to me and say, Brad, they left their spouse. Not once. So I tell them just that rate of clients that come to me with that, and they kind of hear me, but kind of don't. But not once have I had a single person say they left their spouse for happily ever after. No, they tend not to. So commitment, if you want commitment in your life, you have to seek it from people who are not committed and want to commit to someone.
Right.
If they already have commitment, they're not going to necessarily drop everything. So. And
then you studied psychology, and I really like Linda Leonard's book, and she's a Jungian therapist, and she writes a lot about archetypes connected to the artist that are a little unusual. And in one of her books, I came across the idea about love addiction. and how she first discovered it when she had a couple that they were into drugs and they got off the drugs, but then she discovered they had a love addiction, and she said that's even harder to work with. And do you find that that is common? And if so, like how does one hit bottom with love addiction?
I see it more as self-worth, because just someone attracted to them, that person doesn't matter as long as they're attracted to them. But there has to be a healthy sense of self-worth, but not desperate so that you like me, I like you. It's like, no, don't go feeding off that reactionary place, simply because it's affirming your self-worth. Mm-hmm. But I find that to be the biggest problem. It's like, if you have a healthy sense of self-worth, you're going to make proper boundaries and also do things gradually. Usually relationships that start like lightning fast, they tend to end just as quickly.
That's very true.
And that's a hard concept when you're in the middle of it, but if it's gradual and you get to know each other over time, that's the best way to secure a long-term relationship.
That's true. And then the idea of compatibility, you mentioned a little earlier about things you have in common.
Oh,
if you want to build a life together, if you don't have enough in common, how can you build a life? You don't have to have everything in common. Like, there are a lot of things Michael and I are different in, but we have some common values, And,
absolutely.
And that's only for, of course, long-term relationships, because there are other kinds of relationships out there that some people like. Short-term.
Right.
But even if you have just a purely sexual relationship where you meet, X number of times a month or whatever for sex,
Usually you have things in common, otherwise it's not.
That gets a little old after a while, if that's all you got, or if you don't talk to each other, get to know each other. There's a lot of that too. But there has to be something more than just the obvious.
Right.
Michael, did you have any questions you wanted to ask?
Thank you for throwing it to me when I wasn't expecting it. So I like the way you just do that out of left field. So
Sorry,
it's like, dear
I just
God.
want to include you. So.
No, it's cool. I'm enjoying the conversation. One of the things that I thought might be fun too, aside from the astrology, is just common sense advice. Because we've dealt with so many relationships. So I'll let you guys share or in on some of the things I've seen, my personal beliefs. And a disclaimer: I am not a therapist. I am just a good old-fashioned tarot reader that's done 20,000 readings and 19,999 of them about relationships.
Yeah.
So here's the deal. I think the one big mistake, or one of the many big mistakes people make, is just freaking overthinking it. Everything is just psychoanalyzing everything and all that stuff. And, I honestly can tell you, I think it's really impossible to make somebody love you, and I think it's really hard to make somebody fall out of love with you. If it's going to work, it's going to work, and if it isn't, it isn't. And I think just relax and do your thing. And I think that also some people approach relationships as sort of a competitive thing. Does he love me as much as I love him, sort of thing? Like, there has to be that. And I think that people are so different. Krista's emotional IQ and level is very different from mine. So I probably do not experience the relationship exactly the way that Krista experiences the relationship. And I've often thought, aside from that, and forgetting about that, here's a good question. Is it working for you? Is this relationship fulfilling a need? Is it something that's working for you at this point? And if it's working for you, perfect. That's all it's got to do. And don't worry about, as I said, does the person love me and how much do they love me and all that stuff. Is it working for you? Are you getting your needs met? Is the person showing up consistently? Are they helping to fulfill your life in some way? Are you better off with them than you were without them? And is it fulfilling the need that you have? And to me, if it is, then it's a good thing. And, I think people struggle so much with this idea that they're somehow going to have permanence. When we live in an impermanent universe, everything is constantly changing. So you don't know if the guy's going to get hit by a meteor tomorrow. You've only got the moment, enjoy it. And if it's working, and if tomorrow, Krista and I have spent 23 years hanging out together. Basically, we don't psychoanalyze our relationship.
Nice.
We don't spend 6 months in relationship therapy. We don't have deep conversations about it. We hang out. We drive our muscle car. We have fun. We go to the movies. We just hang out together. And I think good relationships, I think they just work. And I think that this idea, and then as I said, I think that everybody's into love, and I think that's wonderful. But to me, that's not what keeps a relationship going. It's respect. And does the person treat you in a way that you can maintain respect for them? And I always say, when you end a relationship or break up with somebody, it's not because you stop loving them, it's because you stop respecting them at some point. And I think that's earned. I think that's how you treat someone, earns their respect. And to me, I think people give way too much emphasis to love and not enough to respect. Does
That's
the
true.
person earn your respect?
Yeah.
And to me, that's a good relationship if they do. But as I said, this idea that you're going to change the person and transform them into Brad Pitt with Stephen Hawking's IQ, and it's not going to happen. They are who they are, and let them be who they are, and enjoy them for who they are. And as I said, if it's working for you, that's all you need to worry about. And don't overthink it. People way overthink their relationships, in my opinion, anyway. So we'll see what Brad has to say about that.
Well, and like for example, like with two fire signs, I have a thing called the fire sign fun factor, where if you're with a fire sign, there needs to be some element of fun. I don't care. A little bit goes a long way with Aries, Leo, Sag, but I think that's a good gauge for any given relationship. Do you have fun?
It's true. In
And
fact,
I've asked people that,
yeah.
and they'd be like, do I have to answer that? Like, literally, they had to think about it.
Funny.
And I'm like, if you're not having fun, why bother?
My aunt used
So
to
true.
always say you should be having nonstop fun the first year of the relationship. If you're not having fun the first year, then how do you expect to get through other things when like life happens and like, but you don't even have a base of that. So
And they call that the honeymoon period, where
Right.
you're
But
on your best behavior.
But it is tough when you really do like someone and you feel like there's and like people are so friggin' complicated these days.
Yeah.
Everybody is so complicated. Everybody's in a committed relationship with someone they don't love anymore and they can't, like, you know what I mean? It's like all this or this or my job that or money this, and it's just all so complicated that I think a lot of people think, but if I can just ride through, if I can just, it's sort of like what Michael is saying about is it working for you?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, when you ask them that question, will have like, they'll take a pause, but then they'll have like 20 reasons why, well, it's not working for me, but they're still awesome anyway. And here are the 20 reasons. And none of them are we're having fun.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll just share one other thing real quick with you guys, too. And I think when we're talking about a real partnership, a real marriage, a real relationship that's serious, I often say that there's one question I think you need to be able to answer. And I think you have to be able to do it without hesitation. It sort of builds on what Kristen was just saying. And that's not, does the person love me? Who cares? Is this the one person in the world that no matter what, I know I can depend on? If I was in jail in Tijuana, they'd be trying to get me out, that they've got my back. And throughout, I remember I was making an appointment for a counselor for something and not related to relationships. And at one point, the counselor said to me, you must have a good relationship because you keep using the word we. And I said, yeah, but for 23 years, it's been me and Krista against the world, right? I mean, we've always had each other's back, and I think that's the one thing that if you're going to have a real life partner, is this the one person that no matter what, I know I can depend on? And if you have to think about that, I think you're in big trouble, to be honest, So.
I wanted to add to the whole having fun. What I noticed in any long relationship is how much you can really laugh with them, like let go and just go hysterical. Because I started realizing, I look back in time and I had this one guy, he would never laugh like that. Like, and it was when I look back, I said, God, that was such a tell. How did I miss that,
And that affects the partner over time because then you get pretty serious too.
It's like everything's like a downer all the time.
Well, it
More
becomes
intense.
and I'm
Intense,
kind of a giggly person. And then I think of even my closest family members where we've been roaring on the floor laughing. And I said, that is a real sign because when to laugh like that, you have to really let go.
Let go.
Oh,
Right.
please.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Laughing is a big factor.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'll never forget the comedian that said to me, he didn't want to really go out with me. He didn't think we were compatible because he didn't think we laughed enough together.
Ooh.
But I was sort of like, but you're not funny.
Ooh.
And it was like, but he was trying to be a comedian. I didn't he actually ghosted me. So I should have said, by the way, you're not funny. But it's like, but his thing was, we don't laugh enough together. I'm like, well, you haven't said anything funny.
Oh boy, truth be told.
And it was interesting because he had told me a couple weeks before that a friend's girlfriend had said, "Oh, you're a comedian, you're not funny," and then it's just to prove the point. And then he went and made a bunch of jokes just to get her to laugh. And I'm like,
boy.
yeah, but that's not what being.
Yeah.
It's to be naturally funny.
Yeah.
And to have a sense of humor. And I'm not saying everybody does, but it just was very interesting. Very interesting.
And just to go in the opposite direction, so in my books, each one has a famous couple with each combination of sign.
Right.
When you look at the polar opposite famous couples, you got, so like Aries and Libra is Bonnie and Clyde. Now, for all their negative viewpoints. They were truly enamored of each other.
It does seem that way.
Taurus and Scorpio were the Curies, Marie Curie and Pierre Curie, and literally they're the only Nobel Prize winners that were a married couple.
Wow.
That did. And when they asked Pierre, they said, "We're going to give you Nobel Prize." He goes, "Is my wife going to get it too?" He's like, "No." They're like, "Then I don't want it."
Oh,
You know,
that is
it's
cool.
really, really solid.
Wow.
And like Gemini and Sagittarius is, even though they're broken up, technically they have not divorced. Is Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie.
right.
I mean, they were like the Hollywood couple of what, the last 2 decades, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But like, they still haven't divorced, which I find very intriguing. You know, they could still get back together for all we know. But you know, they're really the polar opposites tend to be the really exemplary types. So, interestingly enough,
I would like to have your view on the whole Valentine's Day pressure. In that, you know, once I had a client come to me, and she'd been dating a guy just for a little while who was a really good guy. And it was their first Valentine's Day together, and he just didn't do exactly what she wanted to do him to do, and she broke up with him.
wow.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I said, well, how does he normally treat you? Oh, he's great. He's always generous. And I thought, okay, it's their first Valentine's Day, and people have different relationships with holidays.
Right.
Some people have had horrible experiences. And some you can train if you really that means something to you, and it doesn't to them. But why would you? Have you ever found that people overdo the importance of Valentine's Day
Or their first Christmas.
or
you know.
in relationships? And how do you?
I didn't get
advise
jewelry. It's
people?
over. You know.
Yeah, it's like,
But
No, my uncle gave my aunt a camera, and she threw it at him because it wasn't.
Ooh.
She's a Libra, and it wasn't jewelry. That's what she wanted.
wow,
Oh,
wow.
wow.
But with
So-
Valentine's Day, Saint Valentine was a Roman. During the ancient Roman period, he was a martyr. He was beheaded by the Romans.
That-
for
that
his
too.
for his religious belief.
Oh my
He was never married. He didn't have a girlfriend, as far as I know, either.
Oh
But
my
like,
God.
how he got associated with Valentine's Day, but he really has a grisly ending, to say the least.
That's true.
Right.
You know, but I think there's way too much expectations about it's Valentine's Day. Show me how much you love me with things.
Right.
Yeah.
And if they're consistently good outside of the holiday, what's the problem here?
Yeah.
You know?
Right, and also some people are just not as romantic. Now, my brother, the Aquarius, would get into trouble because he would just adore someone. But if they really wanted to have like a certain kind of like, I don't know, third dimensional sort of like romantic kind, he just could never please them. And then he would get heartbroken because he just wasn't the kind of flowery kind of like person.
Or I know a lot of men who simply forget.
Yeah.
It's Valentine's Day. Uh-oh. And then
Right.
running out to get a cheap box of chocolates at the last minute is not going to help. You know?
Right.
Get some daisies or something. I don't know. But like, it's really interesting.
Oh my God, I could do without it. Quite frankly.
There's a projection of way too much expectation in the modern day with that holiday. Interesting.
Yes.
Well, and it's also an extension of that idea that learning to let people love you in the way they love and not the way you would love, which is kind of narcissistic when you think of it.
Yeah.
Like, do I want another me anyway? Not really. I'd like to
Right.
be with someone else. Thank you
Right.
very much.
Right.
And then, showing how did they show their affection? Maybe one person writes a poem. Maybe someone helps you a lot, and likes to fix things for you. Maybe someone's a big hugger, Some
Yeah.
people are big huggers. And
Yeah.
I like hugging, but I don't know if I'd like a lot of hugging.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
even with people, I'd be like, oh, because I'm too empathetic. I just,
I had one client who she didn't hear from her dating partner for the longest time. And for Valentine's Day, she had sent to her a teddy bear the size of the ceiling.
Oh my God.
whoa.
Like, as if to
Whoa.
make up for lost time. She was like, I don't think so.
What am I gonna
I
do
gotta
with this?
tell you guys my funniest relationship story, and you guys are gonna get a kick out of this. Just to kind of build on what Brad was just saying, is a friend of mine, Jim. I won't use his last name because it's probably not a good idea. But he just met his wife, and they've been married a long time. And it was just after they met, he went out to she sent him to the corner store for a jug of milk and a loaf of bread. And on the way out to the corner store, a bunch of his friends drove by and said, "Do you want to go for a drive?" And he's like, "Sure." So he piled in the car. And this is in Nova Scotia, in Halifax. And so they went for a drive to New Hampshire. And he was
Oh,
gone
my.
for
Oh, my God.
he was gone for 3 days. He didn't call. She didn't know what had happened to him, where he'd gone. He'd just gone out to the corner store to the 7-Eleven to get bread and milk, and he was gone for 3 days, no phone call. And then finally, after 3 days, of course, he showed up because they'd finally made it back home. But he said, at least when I walked through the door, I had the milk and the bread. He said, I remember to pick them up on the way to the door. So, and they got married, and they've been married for 30 years. So who can say, it's what works. I guess she has a good sense of humor, but I can't even imagine. And he just, but hey, at least he got the milk. So we're back to saying, can I depend on him? Sure, because he did remember to get the milk.
Yeah.
Wow, that's intense.
Wow.
Good Lord.
I don't know how I would feel if someone didn't bother to call and say, I'm in New Hampshire for 3 days.
I think most people would be having the police do a search party or something, But
I have abandonment issues. I'd be freaking out.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I would be like, what happened? And they walk in like nothing. But that's interesting because it didn't bother her. So again, it's just, or it didn't bother her enough to say, turn right around. And who cares about the bread?
Yeah.
Well, that's a really good point. And from reading for so many different kinds of situations, I've always been open-minded in relationships, about relationships, because I've had quite a lot of mess-ups, and how could I be judgmental of other people? And also, I'm just kind of like that in love for some reason. But reading for people for so long, I've seen situations that I would never be in, but I can see it's working for them, and they really love each other. And I really feel like I stay out of it. Like, I don't believe in saying, I'll hear people say things like, oh, they're the perfect couple. And I said, you don't know. It's between those two people.
That's idealism. When you throw idealism in, it's never reality, I think.
And it can go the opposite. Some people could have a terrible relationship, and they have a terrible relationship. And maybe it's based on codependency, but they don't leave each other. And you think, now that's a couple that really should divorce, or they shouldn't live together anymore, whatever it is. And they just don't. Now, maybe there's either something that's working for them that you don't know, or they just there's an obsession, or there's a codependency. But it can, just because something looks bad on the outside doesn't necessarily mean it's bad on the inside. There must be something working for them.
And I think it's symptomatic of the modern day, with just as much as we project onto St. Valentine's Day, it's also, I can't be alone. I can't be single. I can't make up my... Yeah. You know what? Sometimes you're a lot better. Let's put it this way. I would rather be single than be miserable. In a relationship.
You can be very alone in a relationship.
Yeah.
And that's worse than being alone with yourself.
Oh, it's absolutely worse to be alone in a relationship than as a single woman.
But I think there is this societal fear of I'm alone.
And you reach a certain age, and both men and women kind of freak out about, once you hit that, it's like, oh my God, I'm never going to find anybody now. It's going to be harder. And it is. But to me, it's like the older you get, the more it's like, you know what? I don't want to settle. I made it this far.
Right.
But a lot of people think the opposite. They think, oh my God, I got to have 10,000 Tinder dates. I got to get on 5 apps at the same time. I have to go on one date at least a week. Who cares if I'm burnt out and they're all horrible? I'm not going to. I mean, I just know people that do this.
And I think it's hard to meet someone randomly off the street or crossing paths, whatever. But I just don't think dating apps are the best outlet that is the most healthy way of maintaining self-worth.
Right.
Well, it's going back to that idea. It's too fast, like we were talking earlier, and it's very fantasy oriented, and then we're in this whole age of sexting.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
So much. It's like you know me for 2 seconds on an app. We've never really even spoken. There was a guy on an app. We matched. We started texting each other through the app. I said, "Here's my number. Why don't you call me?" Because it was pleasant. And he's like, "No. Text first." I was like, all right. So we started texting, and then within a minute or 2 minutes, he starts the sexting. Oh, will you wear this for me? Will you do that for me? Will you do that? I'm like, this is just, what is this? You know what I mean?
And it's funny because I encountered,
I don't know you.
I encountered a Kundalini therapist who said, with his clients, he says, I have a rule where intimacy cannot be even involved in the first month.
I know that's
interesting.
There's definitely
any type.
And it's not about the rules. It's not that. It has to do with you imprint upon someone when you have sex with them, even if it's just an affair.
Absolutely.
And even if it's a one night stand, you do that. And if there is a bond, an emotional bond, it can be very difficult if something happens and the person ghosts you, and you had the most romantic dates and you had a beautiful time together and you were having beautiful sex and that. If you haven't had that imprint, it's much easier to not go crazy.
And his theory was interesting, but he goes, I'm not a puritanical person. I'm not anti-sex. Yeah. He goes, but you have to look at it as, why would you give, the milk away that when the cow is still waiting in the pasture,
Right.
And I find that very interesting.
Another thought on relationships too, real quick, to kind of build a little bit on what Kristen was saying with people almost being afraid. And I think it's our society. We live in a microwave generation where everything has to be done in 2 minutes and all that stuff. So again, we get those people that met somebody and 3 days later, is this the one? And are we going to get married and have kids? And I always tell people the first stage of a relationship is called friggin' dating. And there's nothing wrong with dating a little bit. And I think people are in way too much of a hurry to skip over that first step. And that's where we just hang out, we get to know each other, we go to the movies, we don't have to have heavy commitments and all this, are you the one and stuff. But we're kind of getting to know each other. And I always think of the old days when people used to court, and they would go through a courtship of a year or whatever before they were even allowed to sort of call it, anything other than that. So I think that we need to slow things down a little bit again and just come back to dating. And there's nothing wrong with that the first year. And I also think that love takes time to form.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I think that it's a process. And I think every relationship starts with attraction. So we're just attracted to each other for some reason, whatever that may be. I think that over a period of time, as you get to know the person more and you get to really see them for who they are more, I always say that attraction or that lust becomes an appreciation, and then after they've bailed you out of jail a couple of times and stuff, then it becomes love, right? But love takes mileage. Love can take years to form, and I think too.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think people confuse it because at the end of the day, their heart either is positive or negative. It feels good or bad. So when someone's in lust with someone, when they respect them or appreciate them, when they're in love with them, it all feels positive. So when someone says, I love you a month in, technically they probably don't. And if they do, that's called obsession. It's not good.
Well,
but at the same time, it just means I feel good.
I agree.
It just means I feel positive when we're hanging out together. I feel good when we're hanging out
And
together.
it would
that's
be
wonderful.
great if this could be more, or
Well,
if we could hang out more and really get to know each other more.
And I'd say a
You
key
have
word that Michael mentioned is courting, which I think people don't even know what that means anymore. Besides, I'm taking you to court and suing you, or we're going to meet at the basketball game, But courting is a process that they had in the old days of getting to know someone better through social activities.
Right.
And so Libra. So the Venus ruled signs are Taurus and Libra, and then Leo rules the 5th house of romance. Those 3 signs, really, if you want to get to know them better, you have to court them. That's the best way to do that. Mm-hmm. But we're way too hyper fast and speedy that it's a process of gradual intimacy over time through social activities. Right. Obviously, you can't take off all your clothes in social activities, So, but it's a very, I love that word. I think it needs to be brought back in full force.
I also remember, Michael, years ago, you said something about the kindergarten stage of relationship, which I really like that idea where, when you first meet someone, you don't think about, are we getting married? And I had to remind a couple people, sometimes when they first meet, there's that great compatibility and attraction, so they skip those stages. And even though they really are compatible, I can see it's going to cause them problems. They don't get to know the personality enough, their little quirks and things like that. And so I always like that. I said that just about, I think last week to someone, don't forget you have to go through this kindergarten stage. It was a princess, where you're just, getting to know each other, no big heavy commitments.
And you're on good behavior, too.
And you're on good behavior. So it's similar to the courting kind of stage.
Yeah.
And my sense is, too, because of, so much of the texting stuff, there's a real loss of intimacy. Just being with somebody and hanging with them. And I'm personally really glad I fell in love before all of this, frankly, because it's harder in some ways. It's challenging because you have to be really vulnerable,
Sure.
And your heart gets broken and you can't hide it. And, but I'm really glad I have had these experiences that I wouldn't take them away at all, even the bad ones, to tell you the truth.
I was asked about Valentine's Day films recently, and I said my favorite one, which is probably one of the darkest ones ever made, is The War of the Roses.
Oh, I love War of the Roses.
Because you get two people who have a sexual attraction that is solid and strong. Right. They get married, and then they realize, I hate your guts. And Kathleen Turner, when Michael Douglas comes, he goes, what don't you like about me? She goes, every time I look at you, I want to smash you in the face.
Yeah, I remember that.
Because that's where the sex wears out, and it's like, I can't even stand looking at you. And it's a really, really genius presentation of that dynamic. So,
I think we should absolutely touch on the whole twin flame thing too while here, because as readers, even if I don't want to know about it, I have to know about it, because people come in all the time and say, I've met my twin flame, and is this my twin flame? And I actually personally don't even know how to see it in the tarot. I'll tell them I can see destined relationships or compatibility or what I call kind of soulmate.
Right.
So I usually just tell them I'm not equipped to see that with the cards, and yet I still have to answer their questions about it.
They just want to justify the fact that they had a soulmate and it didn't work out. So this person is better. It's a better title for it.
It's a tricky topic. So just to let you know, first off, in tarot, in my deck, a soulmate, or dare I say the twin flame, is the judgment card. Because it's like a truthful, like, oh, this is it. But I'm going to say this. So first off, twin flames is Vedic astrology. Vedic astrology is hyper predictive. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's not Western astrology. Western astrology gives you more room to work with. Vedic is very pointed, and it's very black and white. So with Vedic astrology, the theory is, oh, I met my twin flame. There's no one else for me ever.
Right.
They're my partner for life. I've had people come into me and say, my twin flame and I broke up, I'm doomed. I'm like, look, I believe there are multiple people that can be your soulmate, your twin flame. It's not just one, and it's all is lost because of that. If that doesn't work out. Yeah. But there's it's like the new age dish du jour, you know?
Yes.
And it's used way too casually.
Yes, I agree.
I think some people don't even know what we're saying, and they just heard the word.
They hear it, and everybody makes their own kind of definition of it, to be honest. That's the problem, that there isn't one definition that everyone's understanding and using. It's like everybody's got a different way of explaining it, and it is very confusing.
And I'll have a lot of clients coming to me, and they'll tell me about their, how their dating life is going, and I'll say, look, you can't just have someone that has potential come into your life and say, are you twin flame material? No, get out of the way. Right. They could be twin flame material. You just have to get to know them a little better. Right. Or they're not there yet.
Right.
So
I would also like to suggest for people coming for readings that sometimes you think about how you can improve yourself. Like, I have done readings for myself, like, how can I be better with Michael? And I don't get that as often as I think would be healthy. It's more like, what can that person do for me? And love is about giving. And Manly P. Hall, the last time he married this couple who were friends with us, it was his very last time he married anybody. And he looked at the woman and said, you think of him. And he looked at her and you think of her. And altruistic marriages last the longest. That you're really concerned for that person's happiness. That you sincerely want them to be happy. And that doesn't mean you don't have needs and you don't express it. But I wish I would see more people saying, hey, I have this relationship. And I would like to know if there's something I can do. And I do sometimes, but not as much as I would think I would.
Sure.
And maybe it's because I live in LA, I don't know. Or just people don't think that, hey, that's another way to approach relationship that might be helpful.
Yeah,
a different way.
Since we're getting close to the end of the hour, maybe we should let everybody know, first of all, if they want to get a hold of Brad, it's bradkronen.com, B-R-A-D. Brad Kronen. I can spell it right. I just can't pronounce it. BRADKRONEN.com. And maybe you guys can talk about some of his works, his books that we have tonight. So.
Yes. So he does have a series of astrological signs.
They're dating guides.
They're dating guides. Yeah. You also have one book with it all in it. The first book that was published was Llewellyn.
The first book was condensed and wasn't specified. These are for each individual sign of the zodiac. Called Love in the Stars.
And then you have also the book on Psyche and Cupid, which is really a fantastic myth.
Beautiful book.
I'm a big mythology fan, so Cupid and Psyche was a big popular favorite before 1900, and it's all but forgotten about in the modern day. But through the centuries, artists have done paintings depicting that myth, and so I combined it with my own retelling of it.
And you were saying earlier about how it's really an appropriate myth for the times.
Yeah, because with the Me Too movement and everything, Psyche, who is the female of the male-female combo here, she's the first and only heroine in all of Greek mythology. And she is the heroine. She's the one who goes on the quest. She's the one who puts herself at risk with the adventure she goes on to save her marriage with Psyche. With Cupid, I mean. So. And
I know you recently published something about something about the dark side of Sagittarius. You have the title, two essays on...
Jupiter is in Sagittarius for all of 2019, and so because of that, there's this emphasis on winning the lottery and like all this hyper good stuff. and I'm not saying I'm counterbalancing it with bad stuff, but I looked at the lives of 3 famous Sagittarians who basically didn't appreciate the good stuff in their life and assumed that they would always be working out as they would assume a risky situation would work out for them because it always does.
Right.
Like John Kennedy Jr., who not only killed himself, killed 2 other people, his wife and sister-in-law, because he had not finished his flight training.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
I researched the subject matter, and like all the things that were so Sagittarian in nature, just kind of being reckless and careless and not being thorough. You don't go flying a plane when you don't have full flight training. And across the board, aviators were like, lack of depth perception. He dove into the ocean thinking it was the sky.
Oh, God, that's terrible.
And, you know, it's a shame because it's tragic in the sense that he died, but he also killed 2 other people with him.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
And all of your books are available on Amazon? Is that
Yes,
the easiest
Amazon.com.
place?
Just put my name in and the listing should come up. So,
Yeah.
but it's with a K and an E, not a C and an I. Kronen, that is. So.
Yes. Awesome stuff. So
But
many books.
The thing I also want to mention is, besides fun, friendship is another factor.
Yes.
If you're not friends with you, like you have to look at your
Yes.
partner and say, "Would I be friends with you?" You know, and a lot of people can't say that.
Yeah.
My parents were a Gemini and a Virgo, probably one of the worst combos you could have astrologically. They fully enjoyed themselves.
Right.
Whenever my father came home, they would just, "How was your day? How was your day?" Always enthralled and had a lot of fun, and they were great friends.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah, that's a really, really important thing. Because, you're spending a lot of time with them. And you know, it's, I remember I've had a couple people break up with someone and say they were my best friend. I remember thinking, like, really? You broke up with them?
Oh, they broke up with them. Interesting. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think because unfortunately the romantic notion has negatively impacted what we think love is supposed to be. You can't be high all the time. That is an addiction.
Yes.
If you are seeking the
Yes.
high all the time in a relationship, that is what's called love addiction. Or you cannot live without them.
Yeah.
And you feel that. That is love addiction. It is not even romantically good. So,
And I think there's a polarization with men and women with their friends. And like men and women can be friends, believe it or not.
Absolutely. My
Yeah.
best friend, hi Troy, if you're listening, is a man. And we've been best friends for almost 15 years. And, you know, he's in a relationship with someone for 7 years. It's never really been, for some reason, we just hit it off. And he's just very open minded to it. And, you know, but some people can't be, some men can't be friends with women.
But they have to be with their wives or girlfriends if they want to make it work a long time. So,
Yes,
You know.
absolutely.
it's true.
Awesome. So, if of all the books, if you could, you know, other than the love dating guides, which are fantastic, what is another book that you're like, you know, I really would recommend that you guys to get an idea of me. Which one would you like?
So the Sagittarian book I broke into 2 parts. The second part is about a Russian artist who people have never heard of, but he literally spearheaded and came up with graphic design, commercial art, named
wow.
Alexander Rodchenko. And he was at the Bolshevik Revolution when it first started, just fresh out of art school, became in the Soviet government when they started the Soviet government, they actually supported artwork that was indicative of socialism. And so for 10 years, they called it the Russian avant-garde period. It's like the most glorious time in Russian history with art.
Wow.
And then Joseph Stalin took over and squelched anything.
Aw.
And so he was this big enthusiast of communism. And then was like, wait, you guys were all in this together, right? No, you're going to go to a gulag or a death camp or be assassinated because Stalin was so paranoid. But his life is tragic in the sense that he was truly one of the most versatile. He worked in every art form possible.
Wow.
But so immensely creatively artistic, and it all went for naught. But
And that's the second Sagittarius book.
yes, that's part 2.
Part 2. of
Part 1 is
Sagittarius.
Fritz Haber, the father of chemical warfare, who people don't realize created liquid ammonia that keeps us all in the modern day eating. Like,
Wow.
I didn't
I
know
call him the angel of life and death.
Right.
And John Kennedy Jr. is all part 1.
Okay.
So.
And that's really almost every book has these great historical things, which I've always loved about your work, and also your on your blog you do a lot of historical look and political. Which, interesting enough, not everybody that are readers, they're not always they're like separate from politics somehow. That's somehow not spiritual, or you're not supposed to do that. Astrologers tend to be a little more political than, say, maybe tarot readers or, they delve into, they're interested. In fact, I liked Mountain Astrology every now and then.
Oh, they're great.
When they had those, the cardinal cross with the cardinal signs, the cross. And I read a great article that totally prepared me for some hellish years.
There we go. There we go.
And
wow, thank you so much for joining us. And Brad, remember bradkronen.com, KRONEN.com for astrology with him, personal one-on-one astrology, tarot. Of course, Michael and Krista at mysticjourney.com. Please join our family. Subscribe, like, share, comment. We love you.
Thank you so much for watching, and we hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next week for our next show.
Happy Valentine's.
Bye.
Yes, good night.